Okay, so before we go any farther on any trucks, a friend of mine asked me if I'd take a look at his car for him. He buys these older cars all the time. Usually he does a little piddling around with them, enjoys them for a while, and then he trades them off, sells them, whatever. This one's a Mercury Cougar, and this was like a 90% car, like it was 90% done when he got it. And unfortunately, like so many of these cars that get done, they typically have electrical issues, or at least that's when I see them. But it's actually a really nice car. The underside is as beautiful as the interior. It's got one just enormous engine. I mean, just a radical engine in this thing. It runs great, but the clutch pedal is just right off the floor, and you only have just a little bit of travel. So he's got that to iron out yet. It's supposed to be a board and stroke motor, a whole bunch of this, that, and the other, but really a nice, clean car. Well done. If you're not familiar with this, this has that typical Cougar turn signals. I'll have to show you because they're really cool how they work. Well, of course, one of the problems is the turn signals, but it is not in the rear. If you pay attention here, you can see how they work. There's a sequential turn signal, which is pretty cool for the time. But that brings us to one of the problems we have. If you pay attention to the fuel gauge, the key is on, and the fuel gauge is going full. Well, if you turn on the turn signal, watch the fuel gauge. And also, you'll find with this turn signal on, that indicator comes on as well. So you watch how that is coming down pretty slow with the turn signal on. So if you turn it to the other turn signal, which it's falling down behind the dash, you see how it immediately goes to empty as soon as you turn that turn signal on. It goes to full. I turn that turn signal on. You don't see this indicator lighting up, but you do see this side, or you can, maybe. So that's one of the problems. If you hook the horn relay up, the horn stays on, so we have to look into that. So there's a lot of electrical gremlins. There's a few other things I need to look at. The first thing we're going to do is look into this. These are aftermarket gauges. The key's on. You can see how the tack is moving, and it really shouldn't be with the engine not running. Pop it in gear. And obviously it's not idling at 1700, so we gotta look at that and see if it needs fixed as well. A lot of little things needed taken care of. It sure sounds good though. Well, let's get on to what I need to do. So these are aftermarket gauges and an aftermarket panel here. It's missing one of the screws there. But I need to pull this out and get behind it to where all the wiring is that they've hooked up and see which is which on this. Not sure what they've done differently, wrong, or otherwise. I'm not a car guy, so this stuff isn't really attractive to me. But he's a good friend of mine and he asked for some help. I told him I would look into it. That's a screw that's loose right there. It's not even in right. Everybody's a car builder until it comes to electrical. This is why we don't use crimp connectors. Look at that. What a mess. I mean, organization-wise, it's not horrible, but in order to find the problem, I gotta find what they did wrong. Look, more crimp connectors. So they replaced the dash with these digital gauges, but you still have the factory indicators, so the factory indicators have a problem when you turn the turn signals on. Watch this. Watch this turn signal. It never actually shuts off. And the other indicator, which is right here, it's going on at the same time, and that's just a turn signal. Then you go to the other side, and you have, it's clicking, but you have no indicator. So I think part of the problem is they put this aftermarket column in, and not only is that loose, that sucks, because all that has to come off to tighten it, but they probably spliced it in wrong down here. I'm not sure what's behind this. It looks like, judging by this, I don't know why, if you're going to use heat shrink, why don't you heat shrink at all? But judging by this, there's a resistor in here, I'm guessing. But I have to investigate to find out what's going on so we can fix all the problems. I hate this, but there's no adhesive in there either. Easier for me, but too bad for the car. Okay, what do we got? Is there a resistor? And then they run male and female disconnect here, which obviously didn't work anyway. So we have presumably a connection here, and a connection here. No idea. No idea. Let's get the heat shrink off here, make sure that this is not a resistor. Oh, it is a resistor. There it is. Okay. Now that makes sense. I mean, the delivery sucks. So we'll have to repair that, because I'm not going to... Oh yeah, look, the wire's coming through here. Alright, so we'll have to fix this. Now I have to get into the aftermarket gauge cluster wiring. I have to separate all this crap. It's all zip tied together, and it's kind of a mess. So we're going to find out where everything goes, and then move on from there. All the factory indicators are together. And really, to me, the factory indicator wires should have been isolated so that you know they're all... That's the way I would have done it. Isolate those so I know that they're factory. Okay, let me dig into it some more. So, riddle me this, Batman. Why would you use a heat shrink connector, not heat shrink it, but then put heat shrink over it? Yeah, I don't understand. Weird. So this is our tax signal, and apparently it goes to this one. I don't know why it was just twisted, but apparently that I'm at a loss. This is a tax signal, it works with it hooked up, but whatever. Look what they did here. They just ran the wire straight through the connector. Why didn't you just take it out of the connector? It's not doing any good. You could never take that apart anyways. I mean, whatever. So now what I have to do is, you see this white wire is in the very end pin. Well, there's nothing there. It's like everything is off. Like it's not the right one. So I'm gonna have to pull this out and see what goes where and what's supposed to be, because there's no grounds in this as far as I can remember in the column itself. They're just powers. So everything in here is going to be either a power going up or a signal return. You'll have one to go to the front for the turn signals, and then one that comes out and goes to the back, which works with the brake lights, which I'm going to assume, well, I guess I better not assume anything, because after seeing all this crap. So what I have to do now is pull the turn signal cam out of here and pull it out so I can see what color wires they used where, because I can't take anything for granted. So here's part of the problem. Somebody, like when you buy this kit, apparently this column from Flaming River, they send you out this connector, and these crimp terminals so that you can adapt your Ford to the GM style. But apparently somebody didn't realize how to line up the wires because we didn't have power in the right one. So now we're going to be changing this around. I'm not really sure what's going on here, but I may have to get another kit because I don't have enough of these crimp terminals, and I fear that these are all in the wrong place. So I have to get in there, plug this in, and then check the pin out here to see what we actually have coming in here. After hours and hours of tracing wires and trying to figure out what went where, as you can see how much stuff has been added and changed, we've isolated everything. I've found some problems. We've soldered in some things we're taking care of. Lots of just hot wires laying underneath the dash. I've got that handled. I have the dash instrument cluster now. It is complete, and I have just a few wires coming out of it now instead of the montage of crap it had before. So I'm happy with this. These are our programming switches for the fuel gauge and the tach, so we can program that. This is the GPS line. This is a dimmer switch that was buried inside this cluster, and it was for the needles in these gauges. So the gauge is backlit, but apparently you can change how bright the needle is as well, but he didn't know because it wasn't there. So I got the cluster all handled. I think we'll test it when we're done, but we had a problem still with the turn signals, and the problem we had was the fact that you would turn the turn signals on, and what would happen is if you turned, that's the wrong one. These two here are the turn signals. This is a high beam, which didn't work either. But these turn signal indicators, if you turn a left turn on, then the right turn would burn dim, and the same thing, you flip it to the other side and the opposite side would burn dim. And one of the reasons for this is the fact this is a GM steering column style, and it's a GM turn signal switch. You can see it in here. It's your typical GM. So in the Ford, they wire their switches differently than GM, and what was happening was it was backfeeding across the two because it's just wired differently. So now I've got it to where you turn a left turn on, set me like that. You see the right turn no longer illuminates, and I was able to, and this one's not illuminating either, I was able to overcome that by tying the stuff together and then adding diodes. Diodes are like a check valve for electric. They let it flow one way and not the other because we were having a common problem where basically the current was flowing through on the ground because these share the same ground right here. So it was letting the current come back from the opposite bulb through the ground and illuminate it. And then we didn't have a headlight dimmer switch. This one needs to be grounded. I don't know why these ones are like this, but whatever. So now we have a dimmer. I know there's a lot of you guys have no idea what I'm doing with my foot, but I was born before Google, so I know what it is. So that takes care of that. For whatever reason, the guy that built this car and did this wiring, you can see some of it is okay, some of it's kind of a train wreck. He had the connectors, the pins out of here, and a couple of them were in the wrong location. So by we had to go by process and go through and find and pin out where it was supposed to go to, each one of these, and disconnect them and make sure and verify that's what they were. And now we've got them labeled so that we can actually solder them in. And they were all butt connected, and some of this was just tape, just black tape. That's a hot, actually. So now we can go through and actually make our connections. This one was missing, this one was missing. They weren't even here. This one is an actual ground, which we'll be using. And this one is the charge indicator, which we don't need the charge indicator for this because these gauges don't use that. They use something else. It's not in, it's a completely separate gauge here. So we'll go ahead and cap that off. We'll heat shrink it just like we did this one, so it'll be here if it's ever needed again. So let me show you the old column. I was able to bring this column to me. So this is the original Ford tilt column, and you can see here it has two posts. This is how Ford used to do it. They'd bring power in one post, and these two connections would be basically sitting here, and when you hit the button on your horn, it would connect the two, and then it would send power down the shaft out to the horn. Well, that's been overcome by the use of a relay in the front of the fender of the car. So they just basically overcame that with a relay. But if you see here, you have two separate wires that come in. I think it's these two on the bottom. One is for your turn signals, one is for your hazards, and it isolates them. Well, that's what we had to overcome in the GM, because that's what was causing these things to not work correctly. And it was also sending a pulse to that the fuel gauge, because one of the pins was in the wrong location, and it was sending power to that gauge when that gauge on that wire was looking for a ground, not power. So I know it's a lot, but now we're ready to start putting it back together. So all the needles light up, but the back won't. I've got the dimmer all the way up. So now, sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. Well, that isn't us, because I've got good signal here. Whatever. Let's see. Fuel gauge isn't doing that anymore. So I think we're good. Okay, we can start finishing up. I still had this ground to add to the cluster. I don't think it's necessary now since it's all aftermarket stuff, but we'll add it anyways. So I'm getting everything back together, and the horn button here just wouldn't come up far enough to touch the inside ring. So we took it apart and we just soldered a bulb on top of it to see if it'll work. Because this steering wheel is off of the original column. It's an aftermarket steering wheel. Again, Ford in that column used a separate power in and power out for the horn. So when they did this ring here is insulated from the ground. So when we're trying to put this together, I've got this to where it touches here, but it just hits there and does nothing because it's, again, insulated. So I have to find some way to create something to get a ground from here to here to connect the two. So I guess I'll see if I can solder something on. We have contacts here. We need them for there. I might be able to solder a contact here to the wheel somehow, to a screw. I may have to add another hole to run it through. I don't know. See what I mean? This is insulated and this horn button's insulated. This one has to be insulated because that's the one this touches. So it has to be insulated. And then this is what comes on here and touches it, because this center one moves and this one doesn't. Which actually is another problem too, because yeah, it's backwards from what GM does. Anyways, let me see what I can figure out here. It works. It's not ideal, but you know, we're making lemonade out of lemons, so let's see how it goes. This just twists in here. It's kind of a crappy thing too. Hey, knock it off.
It's enough of that.
I think we're like kind of grounding these while I'm trying to push it in. I'm getting aggravated.
Yay, finally.
Yay. Now we can clean up and go take it for a test drive and make sure it's okay. So one of our neighbors came by and he had some gas, so he went back and got it, brought it down for us. We put about 4.5, 5 gallons of gas in it, hit the key, she fired right up. So that being said, the fuel gauge obviously was not right. So when I came home, I reprogrammed it because it was showing just above a quarter of a tank. So I reprogrammed it. We put about 4.5, 5 gallons. So I figured we'd be under a quarter of a tank. I think that's no more than 19 or 20 gallons. Maybe it was a pretty small tank. And that looks to be about right. So that is the end of this one. These aftermarket tanks or aftermarket gauges, they have preset ohms resistance ranges for different fuel sending units in different vehicles, and you can choose them all, or you can do a custom. But you know, he's happy with this. He's on his way, so he'll be coming to get this now, and we can get back to our regular scheduled work, which will be on the other channel, JC Smith Projects. This one will be on JC Smith Beyond the Shop. So because we don't do trucks on the main channel, or on this channel, we don't do trucks, we don't do cars on the main channel. That's what I'm trying to say. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.